So I chose to write about the reading the Gangster we are all looking for. Um, Asian culture has already been kind of interesting to me in general, so I thought this one would be kind of cool after reading the first few pages. Um, for this story, I found the themes to be love was probably the main one, which was kind of given away by the title in general. So, specifically, like loving an unlikely person, because the mother of the narrator was attracted to this boy who turned out to be a Buddhist gangster, and the parents really did not appreciate this. So they actually disowned her after a while because she started rebelling more. She started smoking cigarettes, doing stuff like that, sneaking out. Especially in a war-stricken world, or country, they thought of themselves like versus the world. They didn't really care what other people thought, they just kind of did what they wanted. So for the narrative itself, it was told from the point of view of the mother's daughter. So she had to probably talk to her parents and stuff and discuss the story because she wasn't there. She had not been born yet, so obviously she's learning from stories, which is how the story started. It was talking about her mother's parents' picture of them sitting next to each other in the farm, surrounded by the chickens and the roosters and the other animals. So she goes through the mother's life and how she met the husband in the movie theater, who was outlining him in her mind because it was dark, and she found herself just doing that the entire movie. And that's when she first started, I guess, falling in love, basically, with him. So she goes from talking about that to her birth, about what they did, and he was actually in prison for the birth, I'm pretty sure it was. So she actually gave birth to her daughter in an alley behind their house. It was a school, and there was this black pipe that had a couple stories about it. So yeah, I already discussed this. So they gave birth to a pipe, under a pipe in Vietnam, and she said that all the children used to climb around this and would climb on it, climb through it, all of this. So she said she was just attracted to climb inside of it, but she couldn't because her stomach was stopping her. So she just laid partially outside of it, and she was talking about the different stories that they were discussing this pipe and where it came from, because they've just always kind of been there. One story said that it was a giant trying to get in the sand, hiding from the war, or that it was, and that's how it was burned, and that's why it was black, or it was a giant trying to climb from the sand. And she said it reminded her of the story of the girl who had been murdered and was actually glowing from the napalm that killed her. And she was found floating in the lake. And then after this, the mother and father moved to America with their daughter, and they moved to these Navy houses in San Diego, and it was just a little one-story house, just a few bedrooms, which was a whole complex of houses like these, some of which were 2 stories except for the 2 end ones, and they happened to be one of the end ones. So this was one portion of her life that was rather difficult, but the school life was also difficult for the refugee kids. They were ridiculed. Most other people got most popular, most beautiful, stuff like that in the yearbook, while the Asian kids just happened to be there. And they got the name Yang, all of them basically. They were stereotyped for this because one family of beings came, and I guess a lot of the children just saw all Asian people to happen to be Yang, and they were often ridiculed. Come back to the last point on that slide in a moment. So the parents often fight when they came to America. Her gangster father becomes drunk and is talked about drinking while he watches Monday Night Football, which a lot of people know can cause fights among parents just because the stress they can put on, and then the person that happens to be drunk can often just become enraged for no reason. So the mother goes what some people called mentally unstable. They just said she was crazy. She shaved her head completely, and she was given a blue hat to wear to hide this, and she often cried and yelled many times for no reason. But one fight specifically was much larger than the others, so her father actually threw the fish tank out of the front door, and she was discussing the way the fish laid there in the sun, just dying, I guess. And then her mother actually tore the screen out of the back window and started throwing dishes on their back patio. They would all just break on the floor. So the father gets in the truck and leaves, but would later come back and ask the daughter for her blanket, and he was climbing the tree that he had made for her to get onto the roof where he would sleep. And the daughter told her mom about this, thinking that she would be worried, but at first she had no emotion towards it. But later on that night, she could hear her climb up there. She actually said she wished the father had fallen off the roof and died. But later, when she was still awake, she could hear the mother climb onto the roof and go with the father to sleep, because no matter what, they still loved each other. No matter how big the fight was, they were still together. And that was a big point to her, is that they were just always attracted to each other, so she knew they weren't going anywhere. So they received a notice one day that they had 30 days to vacate the house because someone new had bought the complex and planned to rebuild. And they thought it was a joke. They didn't believe it, so they just threw it in the trash. After the 30 days came up, though, what they didn't believe, all their belongings were taken because they waited too long. And obviously they didn't want to go on without their belongings, so they cut a hole in the fence and broke back into their own home, which sounds ludicrous to me because you should be able to get your stuff. So they pack everything up that they remember, at least, their brushes from behind the bed, all their dishes and stuff. But while they were driving away, the mother actually remembers that early on she had put a photo of her her parents in the attic and said they were living there, which with her mental illness kind of makes sense that she would believe that they were actually living there. But she forgot to grab it when they were originally leaving. So as they're driving away, she says she forgot her parents and that they had to go back. And everybody else in the car, the people that they lived with, and her father laughed at her and said, well, are you going to walk back to Vietnam to get them, or what's your plan? And she just sat there crying, and nobody understood why, but the daughter kind of got the idea, but not fully. And they hear a faint police siren in the background, and that's kind of where the story ends. So I thought it was a pretty good read. It kept me interested the entire time. The characters were interesting. It was kind of like, it seemed like an extreme case scenario, but it still kind of made sense, and that's what I liked about it.